And before you start working on the image, just go on and study it. So for example, in here, in this image, we see that there's a distortion in the lens. So we will need to undistort the image before we even continue, because when we're going to calibrate the camera, it will not capture it as we want it to. So first we'll need to use After Effects, this additional effect for our distortion, or in Mocha Pro we can also do that. And you can study, like, okay, we only need to recreate this geometry, the holes to fill in and so forth. Like in here, for example, this one is hard because there's so many columns here, and especially this parts with X, which will require to create a model, a geometry. In C4D you can copy and then extend it, but to align your projection onto this geometry might be a tricky part, because you need to align it very well. So that will require some trial and error and working. And here as well, this one you'll need to also to extrude and push in order to create the arcs inside. So that will also require some work here, as well as trees. They are a tricky part, and this sun might create a problem, as well as we don't see the full image of this one, so we'll need to recreate it probably in Photoshop and get rid of the brightness and so forth. So you need to evaluate the picture. For example, here the trees will require some time to cut them out using the alpha channels, luma extraction and so forth, and we'll need to create a 2D bush out of it, which will not seem so real. So it's best if we not using any bushes, but maybe we can actually add a 3D bush. Might be available in the collection in Cinema 4D. So if you go to here on the right side, you have content browser, and if you have presets, if you have got that kind of version and have 3D objects, somewhere here you can also search. And maybe you can find some bush, and we have some bush here which we might be able to use, and it kind of looks very similar, so it's good. We can adjust it if we want. Now, another problem is with the shadows, as you can see, because if we're going to move, the shadows are going to stick to the ground, and if we move too much, it will not sell the picture out, so it might cause a problem. So it's better if it's not there. Better to avoid these things, depending on the motion of the camera, of course. So yeah, study the image and prepare the image. First thing is to go to render settings and change the resolution. We know that our image has got a 4K resolution, so we'll go and change it, and then it will adjust the picture, so you will be able to see in the resolution you're going to export it. Next step is to go to project and change some settings here. So the first thing is project scale, as we are going to work with environment. It's better to calculate everything in meters instead, so go and change centimeters to meters. Keep it at 1 for the project scale, but depending on the environment you might need to change it. Also scroll down and you'll see a view clipping. Basically it extends the fog of the view in the scene. So for example, here we have a scene and we had it on medium. We were working on 005. All that is behind it fades away, so we need to select it as large. For example, let me show you another different example. We had 1, which is okay for meters. That's the way to work with. And then we had it large, and we had the opposite problem. It cuts out everything that is close, so we had to bring it back to medium. So you'll need to adjust it accordingly if you want to adjust some fog disappearance and so forth. Now we need to create a camera, and we're going to convert it to a projector. Look for the tag under the tracker tags called camera calibrator. Before that, I also advise to choose the protection tag. It will stop you from moving the camera by mistake, so it has to be static as it is. So let's go back to the calibrator. Now we have to use the image that we're going to project. By using this image, we're going to calibrate the projector and its settings and lens and so forth, so that it is correct, and the objects that we're going to create are looking the same as if they are in the picture. So let's go to calibrate and add grid. So now we're going to tell the system where is X, Y, and Z axis, so it can calibrate the camera correctly. So let's choose the lines and create the ground, and then by holding shift you have to click on the line, and red means it's X-axis. Click again, it will be Y-axis green, and another click will make it Z-axis blue. So that's the Z-axis, and then this one will be X axis. Now we need also to give it a y-axis, create an additional line, and just click it until it's green. It's better to create as many as possible until it's all solved well. So we use the lines and grids on the various locations, closer to the background and closer to the foreground and so forth, so we can calibrate the camera perfectly. That might be enough. The only one, camera position, is unsolved, and we need to add a pin which tells the system that any object that we create are going to appear in here. That's the center of the scene. So all seems fine. Now let's create a background object, and it will create a background of this image as a reference for us to create a geometry onto. It also already calibrated our camera, adjusted the settings accordingly to the image, so it will adjust the sensor, field, and so forth. So now whenever you create an object, it will appear in the center of the pin that we created there, and if you move it, you will see that it moves accordingly in the scene, like as if it's there, right? Now let's leave the projector and create a new camera which we're going to use to wander around here. And as you can see, that's the scene for now. First of all, let's create the ground, the road that we're going to project the image onto. First of all, we need to make it even to the ground, because now the object appears in the center and it also goes below the grid. Let's move its axis, and we have an axis center. If you don't have it, go to Windows, Customizations, Customize Palettes, and search for axis center and drag it here. Then save it. Save a startup layout. So whenever you use a startup layout, it will show you the top menu so that you create here. So click it, and we want to make this axis go on the bottom. Let's go y-100 and execute, and will not allow you to, because you need to create this object into a poly object that you can adjust. So type C and we'll convert it, and then come back to here -100 and execute, and then adjust the axis to the ground level of the object on the square. Now we have to move it and adjust it to the ground. So deselect the axis, select the cube, go to coordinates of this object, and on the Y type 0, and we'll move it to the ground completely. Stick it to the ground. So if we go to the projector, it's now on the ground, so move it close to the projector. Because we work in the meters, it's so big, and then we say it's 200 meters, so let's make it like 20 meters, and we'll have a much smaller cube here. But in our case, we don't really need a cube because we're going to create the ground, so let's get rid of it for now. You need to create a plane first. So plane for the road, and just extend it, make it look like a road. Let's also make it editable. Now let's say we're satisfied, right? This is the road. Now we need to tell our projector to project the image onto this geometry and accept it as an object which we can project the image onto, because it doesn't know it yet. And when you need to open up a projection map, you'll not have this window here, so you need to go to Windows and find a projection map. Open it up, you will have a floating window. I added between those two. So we have a plane for now. Let's assign it to a projector. So drag and drop on the projector and load a bitmap. Now we have to load an image. There's only one layer available, so click OK, and it will project the whole thing. See, if you go to the camera, move around, you will see the road here, right? It is projected. It has got bad quality because you need to adjust it. So whenever you project it, there will be a material appearing here. So double click the material. As you can see under the luminance, it projects this image, and it also creates a reflection, but we don't need that. Alpha, keep that. Go to the viewport, and under the texture purity size, instead of default, select no scaling. Therefore, it will bring back the quality and the resolution. You can also turn off the background if you like, to see how it looks like for now. So we have this road, right, which we project this image onto. Of course, we could start building it, more objects. For example, we can go on and build the cube. Let's make it 20 meters again. So let's take a cube under the projection map and click OK, and it remembers everything. It creates another material here. What you could do actually, just let's go back, copy the material from the plane, hold Control and drag and drop onto the cube, and it'll project map the same thing here. You'll see it appearing here as well. It's the fastest way. So let's just extend it to this image, and you can see it kind of projects the whole thing. Now we just have to build the scene here using the correct distance, because that's the road, as you can see. So the mountain will be far away, so if we make it bigger, then we will be able to see it move correctly, as if it is in the distance. So you will have to build the scenes, but as you can see, if If we keep it like that, the sky would move along with the mountain, but they are on a different distance. So if we want this parallax effect, we need to separate them. So what we need to do actually, we need to bring this image into the Photoshop. We're going to cut out each layer of the distance and also cover the background. So as you can see, we have a background sky on its own separate layer, right? We have more mountains. Here, if we remove a mid-mountain, see this part, even we don't see it, even the mid-mountain covers it, we still have it there. We need this coverage of the background. Whenever we move with the camera, the mountain will move further and will reveal what is behind. If we have nothing behind, it will be just empty space. So we have to paint this out. We have to continue and paint this out, right? And to do that, of course, we use a stamp tool, or we remove anything that we don't need with a spot healing brush, and so forth. So we just break it down into the layers, and we create coverage on the background so that whenever we move, we reveal the image behind, which is as if there. And we break it down, and then we have so many layers. Save it as a Photoshop file right here. And now we used before just an image. Now we're going to use a Photoshop file. So let's delete this. We go to this cube, and we want to show our mid-mountain. And here you will see that it will show you all the layers that we have. And we also have an alpha channel. So for the alpha channel, also select a mid-mountain, right? So let's go here, viewport, no scale, no reflection. And that's the layer. You see, there's nothing there, nothing else, only the mountain. So now let's select this cube under the projection map. We're projecting it only on the front of the cube. So if we want to get rid of the rest of it, we have to go and choose both. And we'll projection it onto both sides of the cube. If we look back, you'll see it's like a taco. We actually will not work with cubes. We're going to work with planes. So whenever you have it, like we could just go on, make it editable, get rid of the sides. Even though we do select it to be projected onto the both sides, as it has got only one side, it allows to get rid of the background. It works in this way. I'm not sure why, but that's the way to make it completely transparent. So if you keep it at front, it will keep the gray plane. If you choose both, it will kind of use the alpha channel here. So now we have this, and you'll see that it moves on a different axis, right? See, it's like different. It's there. So we created all geometry. We have some mountains. We have a background, a sky. Some of them are flat. Some of them are created from mountains. Let me show you. If you create a landscape, you can adjust the landscape, its size in the different directions, and then you can projection map on it. You simply would need to do it in such a way that you need to bring it to the mountain and just adjust it, you know, like adjust the height, width, and so on until it looks like the mountain. Of course, I would go and make it as flat as possible. You can just go with flat images. If it's too far, you will probably not notice it. If you are too close, then you need this. But here in this example, actually now if I would remake it, I would just make it flat, you know, a little bit under the corner, you know, because from the far away you will not see it. So you create these ones, and again, this is not a little bit great, you know, I cut out the edges. You just keep it like that, flat, because alpha channel will get rid of it anyway. So there's no point for you to, you know, cut it all and make it even perfect and so forth. So we don't do that. So as you can see, we have right field and we have left field, we have right hills, and we have a road as separate, like the main road, and I separate them, as you can see. So this time I would connect them as one, but all of the parts that we don't have, we cannot connect them. I would not advise to do so, because such a long distance, you don't need such a long geometry. You just need the parts that are appearing. So as you can see, if we move around, because all of the parts being on a different distance, they move differently in the parallax. That's why we covered this image in Photoshop, because whenever we move, we reveal what is behind. Sometimes we'll have to go back to Photoshop and recreate the backgrounds that you need to cover the space, and to do that you just need to go to Photoshop and repaint it, you know, and then it will automatically adjust it here as well. Or you can just go here to the luminance and under the arrow click reload image, and it will refresh it and so forth. So you create this geometry and you go on, you projection map all of those layers from Photoshop with alpha channels there, and you create this image. What we can do, you know, if we select lines, you can just go on, select lines, you can extend them, but if you hold Control, you can create another line and extend it further, kind of extend it with additional copies, so we can copy them and create many geometries there from it. What you can also do, like let's say you have a hole here, and if you want to connect them, right click, just close polygon hole and click it, and it just closes it. What also you can do, so if you select a polygon point, then select points, so we have to click it here, click this one, and back again, and you will close it. Let's say here you can create it, right? Another one. Also you can line cut, you cut this line and you create a line, then you can extend from it, and so forth. There are more tools you can use. The next thing is to create UV maps and bake them onto the image so that we can deliver the object, because whenever we move, as you can see, the mountain doesn't move with the geometry. We need it to stick to the object and move with it along. So let's select the road, and here's the road, right? So we have a geometry here, and that geometry has got its own lines and so forth. So this is a UV. UV is basically a geometry which is converted into 2D plane, which we can put our 2D image on, and therefore it will wrap around the 3D object. So if you hold shift and double click this UV, you will see that that's the road in the square here, just wrapped out and kind of put onto the 2D table, right? So to say. Now if I select this part, that's the part from top, and so forth. You can also select dots and lines, but normally when you do it first, it will not seem that way. So let's just delete it. If you lose it or delete it, you can go back to material tags and set up UVW from projection, and it will create it again. That's how it will seem. So we have to adjust it. Go to layout. We need to go and work with UV edit. So that's the thing. All we need is this part. So let's select this UV in a packed way. So let's apply, and that's what it created. It created what we had before. We can also use cubic sometimes, and you can also use angle sometimes if you have a problem. But normally we use packed, and then if we go and check most of them, they kind of wrapped here around in a strange way, But the thing is that that's the part we're going to create and bake our image onto, so it would stick, and whenever we put it onto the object, it will just align perfectly. So that's how it would look like in the end. That's our image, which we're going to bake onto the object here. So go through all of them, make them look okay by selecting all of the parts here and choosing packed, cubic, or angled, whichever is perfect. I don't use a lot of spacing here. Normally by default it's 1%. You can stick to 1 as well. Next thing, we're going to bake this projection onto the object so we can have a texture. So let's go back to our normal view, and to bake the image, let's go to our tag. It's under material tags, bake material. Now if it would be one object, you just combine them all and bake it on one object, but we're going to break it down one by one. So we create a texture only for road here. Click on the bake here, and that's the options here. So we need to choose a format, which is PNG, and we need to name the file and save it to UVs, for example. And I name it accordingly, so I name it a road UV. We need to give it a resolution, so choose the resolution, which is square. So we take the highest length here, which is 4K, and we're going to bake it onto the square. Then go to options and use polygon selection. We are going to bake luminance because, as you remember, that's the only one we have. We also need to bake alpha. So let's choose alpha. And you can preview first. That's the texture we're going to receive. When you click bake, it will save the image. For road luminance, we have an image here. It's messed up, but whenever we're going to put it onto our geometry, it'll be fine. So what I do actually is keep this scene of projections as a backup, just in case. Copy it to a scene of a baked scene. Turn off the projection here, and let's remove the projection material. And we have gray road here. So let's create a new material here and add it to our road. I'm not going to use color, not reflectance, but luminance. So let's go and load this image of the road that we created here. It'll put it onto the geometry. Don't forget to go to viewport and choose no scale for the resolution being correct. If there will be alpha channel, you also need to go to alpha channel and select our alpha channel that we created, but there's no for this one. If you have an alpha channel which is required, so for example we add the material here, right, onto the mid mountain, and we did add our mountain texture, and you will see that there's like black edges, which is not good, so we need to add an alpha channel as well. We'll go to alpha, and we also need to add our baked alpha channel along with this. So if you open it, it will then use this alpha channel and get rid of the black background and make it even. By the way, the background that we created for reference, you can get rid of it. We don't need it anymore because we already recreated the whole background here. So whenever you're going to move this object from now on, as there's no projection on it, the texture will be stick to the object, so it will move. Now we will be able to deliver this, right? Because with the projection, it will not be able to be used on the other end. So we have to go to each one of them and bake each one, name them accordingly, alpha channel and so forth. Now in C4D there's some kind of issue with alpha channel. It creates a white fringe around the edges. So let's say we go to the mid mountain. That's the projection that we have. It's all good, you know, looks great. And we go to bake it. We go and bake alpha and luminance. So let's try to apply it now, right? Let's get rid of what we had before. Let's use this new material that we have. Let's see how it looks like, right? And as you can see, there are white edges here. And I think it's because I have a geometry which has got like edges here, right? It kind of tries to adjust it and edges create this mess. For example, for this one, I have just a square and I didn't have this issue. Sometimes there might be issues. There also might be lines. For example, if you messed up with a UV, so sometimes you would make it like this, or maybe it will just split it in half sometimes. And if you're going to bake this thing, you'll see this white line in the middle as well. So it's better if you keep it as one unit. So now, how to get rid of these white lines? What we really need to do is to go to Photoshop and bring those images to Photoshop. So what it does, see, it creates this black and it creates these fringes here. Normally in After Effects it's kind of a pre-multiplied problem, but here, even though you go to Material and you choose pre-multiplied, it doesn't fix the issue, right? So we need to do it manually in Photoshop. Paint all of those lines black. We'll get rid of them. Fastest way will be just select all of the mountain here, then select the inverse and paint the whole thing black. Deselect this, go closer, and you see these lines, like you have to paint them out. That's actually the lines that you really see there. So once you paint them out, sometimes you'll also have to paint out the edges because there's something there as well. You know, you have to go to the second one and do the same thing. I had many images here, as you can see. I painted all of them black. There were many whites here as well. All of them was whites. I painted all of them, prepared them well. You know, sometimes you need to do this part. It's okay, and don't be afraid. The parts that are hidden in the geometry, you can just paint on them and don't care about the perfect edges. So you prepare them, alpha channels and originals. So that's how you fix that issue of alpha problem. Sometimes you'll need to move the geometry because those lines will show up. You'll need to hide one geometry under the another geometry. Like here, for example, see I have this part. Sometimes you just can paint them black if in the top here was a white line, but I painted it thinly black here on the texture. What you can also do, you can just go and paint them out as copying the parts from nearby. But you know, so as you can see, I have two of them. So like I have far hill and I have a far field, and I kind of hide one under the other, like before, if they were like even. Then that's why I saw the line here, and I just, okay, I need to hide it, so I extended it further underneath, and there's a white line that I don't need. See, you can either paint it like I did on the Photoshop, or you can just think how to hide. But the perfect option would be actually, as I said before, to have this field not in the units, but as one standalone unit, right? Not broken down into some parts. That's how you also would get rid of those white lines, alpha problematic lines. Here we are, we have actually prepared the scene. Sometimes you need to go back to Photoshop, extend maybe. If you decide to move a little bit further to the left, you have nothing there. You need also to extend this part. You have to Photoshop and paint it further, unless you're going to zoom in a bit. So then you don't need a lot of coverage. But you know, again, this is an example. So what next? You know, after everything's baked, everything prepared, we need to prepare it for the client and send the model with all textures and so forth. So back up the project, you know, create another one. When we're going to export it as FBX, we don't need the projection, we don't need the camera. I leave projection and name it like camera for client to know that's the starting point for them to see from. And I keep this scene baked, right? All geometry with all images. So we go to File and then we go to Export and export as FBX. Now here you choose latest version. If the client has got the oldest version, then you need to use one accordingly. Don't use selection only because we want to export a whole scene. We export cameras. You can use blinds as well. Normals, we don't have them, but it doesn't matter. We don't have them, it's not going to show. Tracks, we didn't track anything for animation. Materials, we don't want materials. Keep it Fong, Lambert. We don't bake materials because we already did. We don't bend textures and so forth. We don't have lights. I don't know what that is. Keep that. Use it as such. And just click OK. And then you're going to save it. I saved it here already, so you see mountain. Whenever a client opens it up in his software, import this mountain here. Select everything accordingly, just click OK. And we see from the camera here, right, which we can move, but better not to. And we have this scene. As you can see in Cinema 4D, there's no mountains on the back, so we have to go to Project, Ctrl D, and choose View Clipping to Large. And then we have the whole scene here. Also, we have bad resolutions here, so select all materials, go to viewport and select no scaling. We don't need colors, just keep luminance, alpha whenever it's needed, just keep it as such. And here you go, you have a scene. So you have a scene with all the UVs and the camera, so you can move around